Welcome everyone to our Women's Earth and Climate Action Network event, Indigenous Women Upholding Indigenous Rights and Knowledge and Leading Climate Solutions. We're really glad that you could be here with us today. This is a formal side event of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, which is going on today in New York City. My name is Osprey Oriole-Lake, and I'm the founder and executive director of the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network, or WECAN. And today we'll be hearing from an incredible group of Indigenous women leaders who are fighting every single day to protect and defend the earth, the sacred, the climate, and their rights and communities. They will also share with us their frontline struggles as well as their visions and strategies for shaping a healthy and equitable world. We're really honored and thrilled that they've taken the time to be with us today, and I'm going to be introducing them in the order that they're going to be speaking. We're first going to hear from Ruth Miller. She is an Athabaskan Indigenous climate activist and artist from Turtle Island, or in the USA. Then we'll be hearing from Yasso Kanti Bhattachan. She's Thakali, founding member and the vice chair of the National Indigenous Women's Forum from Nepal. And then we'll be hearing from Charlo, Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, Indigenous Feminisms organizer with the Indigenous Environmental Network from Turtle Island, USA. And then we'll be hearing from Jay Bastita, who is Otomi Toltec. She's the co-founder and board of Re-Earth Initiative, Turtle Island, USA. Thank you so much for being with us. And we're actually going to start with the traditional opening. And Claire, thank you so much. You can help us with that.
Hi. Hesahalt, Chalu, Claire. My name is Claire. I am literate Salish, and I'm going to sing an opening prayer song. So if you can stand, please, I'd appreciate it. This is a song of my fathers, and this is to welcome in all the good energy, all the good spirits. Oh, hey, oh, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, oh, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, oh, oh, hey, oh, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, oh, hey, oh, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah, hey, ah. Not much too soon.
Thank you for that beautiful welcoming. Thank you so much. Before I get started, I also wanted to thank all of our amazing volunteers. We can't do this without you. Thank you so much. And a very special thanks to Harriet Sugarman from Climate Mama for collaborating with us on this event. We're excited to be with you today during the UNPFII so that Indigenous women's leadership and solutions and calls to action can be heard and visibilized. We're going to be having two panels today in which we're going to learn from Indigenous women leaders globally on the impacts of fossil fuels, deforestation, and the climate crisis in their communities, and how they are implementing solutions, practicing traditional knowledge, and upholding Indigenous rights and advancing policies of care and climate justice. And I really think it's good for all of us to talk about how we can more deeply be standing in defense and protection of Mother Earth in the face of escalating climate crisis and dangerous economic structures, environmental racism, and rights violations. Clearly, we can't win these struggles alone, and that's why we need to be together. So we're going to be hearing from all of these Indigenous women as they are protecting the web of life, and to say we are standing with you. And also, speaking of the web of life, we don't want to forget our relatives around us today, the trees, the oceans, the rivers, the mountains, the animals of our beautiful planet, which we also stand in solidarity with. And also I want to mention that we thank the Lenape people as we are on their homelands here in Manhattan. Indigenous women are working worldwide in the face of increasing challenges, and they are calling for us to really stand up for the sacred systems of life. At WeCan, we are strong advocates of rights-based approaches to solutions, from indigenous rights to women's rights to the rights of nature. And it's important to highlight that violence against the earth is directly linked to violence against the women. And patriarchy, colonization, and capitalism and racism are all based in power over and exploitation of women, the land, indigenous peoples, and peoples of color around the world. And this is the system that we want to dismantle, disrupt, and bring forward our vision of what kind of world we want to be building. And that is what we mean by climate justice and respecting indigenous sovereignty. And that's what we're going to be fighting for. WeCan has been honored to be in the territories and lands of many of the presenters today, advocating, taking action, and standing in solidarity with our sisters as they lead efforts to protect their homelands. In each of these ongoing struggles, the women's voices shine boldly with dignity, wisdom, love, and strength in the midst of really great challenges. Women's voices are rising to say colonization must end, sacrifice zones, and environmental racism must end. Violence against women's bodies by extractive industries must end. The desecration of indigenous sacred sites and violations against indigenous rights must end. The destruction of the earth and water must end. So we're really at the cusp of this doorway where we cannot back down for a moment, and we're putting a red line to say no more destruction, and we must protect free, prior, and informed consent, which is the theme of this year's UNPFII. The women are also offering many solutions, and one that is so important to all of us is to remember our inseparable connection to Mother Earth. This is a solution. Indigenous people are a solution. And also later this week, WeCan will be coming out with our statement for governments and financial institutions about our recommendations that we are making and demanding from financial institutions and governments, standing up for indigenous rights and for free, prior, and informed consent, and the fact that we must uphold these international standards. So with that, I'm really excited to welcome our first speaker, Ruth. You can take it away. Thank you.
Yachlidu, can you hear me? Yachlidu, everyone. Nefeshen, welcome. Shirak isench iji. Dena'ina tanaga shatkun kanash to Curyung etnenish ite. Shibis nak Heather Kendall Miller shumta to Lloyd Miller stupta. To chikniket and hanu bagud yachli et sete. My English name is Ruth Miller. My Dena'ina name is Shirak Isen, which was gifted to me by my elder Dena'ina Slasin of Tyonik, which means whirlwind woman. I am a Curyung tribal member. I was born and raised in Łchav'aya on my people's homelands in Anchorage, Alaska, known in English. And my dad's from New York, actually. So I also have a long history with the beautiful homelands of the Lenape people. And I'm so honored to visit with all of you. Thank you for spending your time with us in this way. As means of introduction, I introduced my people, but also my parents, who have nurtured me into the being that I am today, but I also carry with me generations of ancestors. And when folks ask Indigenous people to talk on environmental issues, I always find it just a little bit funny, because there's no distinguishment in our people's culture, nor in our language, about being an environmentalist or caring about the environment. It's intrinsic to who we are as Dena'ina people. There is no difference between our bodies and our land. There is no difference between our bodies and our plant and animal relatives. And when violence is committed against one, as Osprey already shared, we know that it is rippling throughout our ecosystem. We know that we, particularly as Indigenous women, who are an integral part of the cycles of life, are inordinately impacted. And so I come to you today from an interesting place. this is my 4th year at the UNPFII, but I am really diving into my own acts of creation as an artist. And despite my last 16 years of climate change advocacy, I feel that I'm able to come today with a very fresh new perspective after choosing to take care of myself for a little bit. And so I'll describe a bit of my work, but I'd also like to share particularly around that, and then I really am invested in having kind of a dialogue between all of us up here. But as I said, for the past 15, 16 years, I have been deeply engaged in climate advocacy in my own homelands. When I was 15, I had my first job in my homelands on the shores of Bristol Bay and on the docks of Dillingham, trying to convince fishermen to testify against the proposed Pebble mine, which many might recognize. It would have been the largest copper and gold mine and deeply devastating to my people's watershed. The mine was proposed very, very close to my village of Kijik. And in that time, I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. I was 15. But at that point, asking fishermen to describe, why they were against the mine, which most people of the region were, people didn't really know what to say. They didn't know how to articulate it. But when I asked them, well, how would you feel if our salmon were taken from us? Then people brought story. Then they opened their hearts. Then they had all the words that they could possibly need to share what our salmon mean to us, what it would mean to them to have an empty smokehouse or have no fish in their net. Unfortunately, that reality did come to pass in the past few years because of the climate crisis in my region and throughout regions across Alaska. And so although we only recently, after a 20-year battle, did defeat the Pebble mine, that lesson at the core of climate advocacy really has stuck with me, that it's not about using Western language to get people to oppose extraction. It's about founding ourselves as Indigenous people with what we already know is at our core, which is deep, deep love and reciprocity for our homelands that have gifted us our language, that have sustained us for millennia, that have gifted us our medicines and our traditional lifeways, and meeting the ancestral obligation that we have to honor them and protect them. So in the past few years of climate advocacy, that work has of course taken me to the UN, as well as to the COP, the Global Climate Negotiations, a number of times. But really the work that makes me proud is the work that happened in my own homelands. The Defend the Sacred movement was burgeoning long before I came of age in the movement, and it gave us this framework that initially started with, our lands, our waters, our bodies are sacred. We know that this kind of relationship is integral to all the work that we do. But as we began to strategize politically, as we began to advocate for specific policy, we knew that we needed to begin translating that policy and make it come to us instead of forcing ourselves into these colonial constructs in these spaces that were never made for Indigenous people. And so that became the Just Transition movement. Some of you might be familiar with this work. It attempts to move us from an extractive economy of predation and natural resource extraction to a regenerative economy that's founded on holistic care and wellness. But for us, Just Transition, coming to our Native people, our communities, those were empty words. So we went to our elders and we asked them, okay, this is what we want to do. We want to move away from militarization and the carceral complex. We want to move towards rehabilitation and care. We want to move away from extractive wage labor and move towards communities that are provided for, that have, not just a wage to live by, but don't need a wage to access food in their lands. And they, at the time, Benti Kanaga elders in the interior of Alaska who we approached, they sat down with us, and after a few hours, they gave us the term Kotra Ethne, which means remembering forward. In my language, that is Necheshchen, which means it is remembered within us. And so that is the way that we operate. That is the way that we advocate for policy. When the Green New Deal came to Alaska, I was the Alaska State lead. My first priority was to translate that, not just into our languages, but into our terms. And so we began to consider what would it look like to have these policies implemented on the ground, and what else do we need to see? And so we worked with what was then the Thrive Agenda to create Alaska's Time to Thrive, and made sure that these policies that flowed down from New York and Washington did not colonize us with their limitations, but instead reflected our needs and values as Indigenous peoples who are first and best stewards of our homelands. Later, we convened the Alaska Climate Alliance, and in the same way brought the environmental movement to an indigenous table instead of us constantly fighting to be seen and heard at their tables, which are based on racist exclusion. Instead, we brought together all of the dominant environmental organizations across Alaska, and we convened them under an indigenous steering council so that they would soon be taking direction, taking advisement, and taking wisdom from our indigenous elders. But the last thing that I want to end on is that this work that I started so young and have spent the better part of my youth and now young adulthood doing, it was so devastating. It was so draining that I realized I wanted nothing more than to be a martyr for my people, that I felt it was my obligation to sacrifice myself, to stay up late, to get no sleep, to eat terribly, to constantly be trying to make myself worthy of these spaces. And I became very sick. I became very sick. And that challenged me in the past year to take a step back. When my chronic disease became too much, I understood that it was a gift from Creator to challenge me to reconsider my perspective and my approach to this work. Because it's not just the what of the work, it's how we do it. And if I was sacrificing an indigenous woman's body to do my work on my laptop for 14 hours a day, then what kind of work would come out of that? What would be produced? Would that be founded in prayer? Would that be sacred work? No. And so, in this interim, I feel just as dedicated to my homelands. I feel just as involved on behalf of my people and in the policy that I have worked with in the past. But I now know that doing it founded in a place of love will be infinitely more powerful and impactful. And I know that that is a way of being that my ancestors can see themselves in.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Really appreciate your words. And also really modeling for all of us that self-care is part of the world and vision we want to build, and that we're not here to sacrifice our bodies. And with that, I'd like to hand the floor over to Yasso from Nepal. Please, Yasso.
Thank you so much, Laikan, for giving me the opportunity to share my experience, what is we are facing in Nepal. So thank you all the distinguished panelists and respected and distinguished participants. Basically, I belong to Thakali nation, mountain indigenous people of Nepal. Our population is just 10,500, and our ancestral line is Mustang, near the Tibetan border, China. So we, as indigenous people in Nepal, the total population is almost 36% of the total population. And Nepal government has recognized 59 indigenous people. 18 we belongs to the mountain people. So the impact of climate change every day, every second, every moment, we all in the world, we have been facing it. We are not exceptional to it. But we indigenous peoples, women and girls, have a minimal contribution to climate change. But we are the one who have been victimized, and we are the one who has been impacted the most. And also, the impact, when I talk about Nepal, the impact is that, especially in the mountain region, the snow are melting, the glacier are melting. Last year, the avalanches, first avalanches in our ancestral homeland. Nobody died, but the yak, lot of yak were wiped out by the avalanches, and my sister-in-law, they were, running for their lives to protect their lives. And there is a video also. I can share. It's 2-minute video, but maybe I will give the link so you all can watch that. So people were running, around, and also it has also the drought. Drought in the mountain region has created the mountain refugee because there is no water in the mountain region. So at the village called Samsung Mustang, Moitang, there are 100 members migrated to Namsung, nearby village, due to the unavailability of the drinking water. So this is happening, and also the excessive rain, and before in our ancestral homeland, there were no mosquito, no flies, disease like typhoid, jaundice were not there, because now the weather is getting warmer. So all the diseases are entering to our ancestral homeland. So our life is in very dangerous situation in the mountain region. So due to the aggressive development by the development agency and by the state, the colonizer, in the name of national park, national wildlife conservation, and in the name of a road expansion, our land and territory have been grabbed and evicted, and we are displaced, and we have become the refugee, and we are landless in our own country. And our brother, sister, especially the Tharu indigenous peoples in the plain area, they are the bonded labor. Still we have a girl-child bonded labor in our, and we have raised this issue in our shadow report in 2011 and 2018 also. We have raised about in the CEDA shadow report about the girl-child bonded labor in our country. So our land and territory has been in the name of national park or wildlife conservation or hunting ground. Our ancestral homeland has been evicted. So now we as an indigenous people from time immemorial, our ancestors, our grandfather, grandmothers, they have been practicing some of the solution for preserving and protecting our indigenous knowledge, skill and technology and practices. Still it is in practice. So we still have endangered indigenous people, living nomadic people. Their population is 5,841 total population. They live in the jungle in the name of community forest, leasehold forest. The forests are sinking, so they cannot survive in the forest because there are some forests ruled by the Nepal government. So they cannot go collect the forests and collect the roots and tuber in the forest or have some food in the forest. So that way their life has been really, our human right and collective right of indigenous peoples and women and girls have been really violated. And when we first, our organization, National Indigenous Women Forum, worked with the endangered indigenous people called Raute, Bankaria, Kusunda. The least people, Bankaria are just 89 population and 21 household. So you could see they are in the verge of extinction. So we are against colonization, we are against globalization, patriarchy, militarization, fundamentalism, which is creating us. We are making us the, the English is not my mother tongue, sometimes I don't find exact word, because they are creating problem for us to take us far from the mother nature. But our ancestors, they have always given us the knowledge to be protect Mother Earth. The water is life, water is sacred, land is sacred. So we need to love Mother Earth because the Mother Earth is getting sick. So we want emancipation from the colonizer. So as a name we can collectively we can make a difference. We are the solution. We are not the problem. So we need all of your support to get together, collaborate, coordinate, solidarity, so we can go and have a harmonious life in the world. So thank you. Not much time, so much thing to say. If you have any question relating to me, I'm really happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your powerful comments, Yasso. And we are together, and that's why we're meeting here. This is why we do these events, to really collect all of our power together. And that's what we need, is the strength of us working collectively together and standing with Indigenous women, particularly for all the reasons that you can hear already from the women. And yes, we can, and we stand with you, and no to colonization. So with that, I am going to now hand the floor to Claire Charlo. Please go ahead, Claire.
Charlo, Claire Lewisquest, Lipes Lapapi, in Skelihu, in Chemkene, Salish. Good evening, my name is Claire. That's my government name. My Salish name is Lipes Lapapi, which is Laifan. I, from a very young age, I've had a dream, I've dreamt about working with other women around the world to save the world. And so this is my first time to New York, and this is the first time I've been to the UN. And it has been, it's been really amazing in that I have been able to see the strength and resilience of Indigenous women globally. I work for Indigenous Environmental Network. I am the Indigenous Feminisms organizer, which, what does that mean? I'll tell you. I am bringing back matriarchy. I'm bringing matriarchy back into Indigenous environmental organizing and environmental organizing altogether, because rematriation is the solution. Indigenous women, Two-Spirit people have been on the front lines of this battle for Mother Earth, and it's too much. It is too, extractivism, violence against the earth, violence against Indigenous women and Two-Spirit. We are always fighting on the front lines. We're always putting our people first. We're putting our children first. We're putting our ancestors ahead of our own bodies. Like our sister Ruth said, it is consuming, but we won't ever stop, and that's the problem, is that this is more than just about us. This is about the future generations, and this is about our ancestors behind us, and the level of responsibility that has been carried down. I mean, since I was a little girl, I was told that I have to go save my people, and I think all of us have that responsibility. All of us have been told that, and to grow up with that responsibility I'm not going to call it a burden. It is our relationship to the land. It is the relationship of reciprocity that we have. And matriarchy, I come from a very matriarchal tribe in that we had something called a scalp dance, which we are bringing back. When the warriors would come back from war, the women would put on either their brother or their husband regalia. And the most successful warriors, we would go and kidnap them, and we would beat them until their families, and this was a ceremony, we would beat them until the families would pay a ransom for them back. But it was to humble those warriors. It was to take that toxic masculinity out of our community, so they didn't bring that back to us. So they didn't bring that abuse to us and abuse us. That was one way that we ensured that that toxic masculinity didn't come in to our community, that we didn't bring that warlike energy into our homes. I also, we also have warrior women. We come from a way where the women ask the men to dance. It is disrespectful for a man to ask you to dance. It's the woman. And also, it is disrespectful for a man to sit across from me without asking. Actually, I am supposed to ask a man to sit down. It's, there are so many protocols that are just, it's interesting because I find that a lot of indigenous culture has chosen traditional patriarchy, and they have ignored numerous rights of matriarchy. And I think that is really important, that we really need to bring back the matriarchy, the values of matriarchy. We keep on talking about it. We keep on talking about the earth as our mother, but we need to really, really examine what our relationship is with the earth and how we practice reciprocity. We need to look at how we can be in solidarity with our sisters in Brazil and Chile, in the global south, and also with our sisters and brothers basically around the world, because what we're hearing is that everybody around the world in indigenous communities is suffering from climate catastrophe, and we need to join together, and matriarchy is the solution. We need to look at the values, and we also need to treat each other in a good way. One of the things that I found to be one of the most disheartening parts in organizing is how easy it is that we break down each other. We turn on each other, and we have to stop that. We have to be in a community of love. And once again, that's a value of matriarchy. That is a value of care. The opposite of extractivism is care. They are going to dig into our lands, they're going to drill, they're going to take. So what can we give back? We give, but we have to make sure we're giving back to ourselves. We have to make sure that we are giving to each other in a good way, that we're trying to heal the earth, and we're not healed ourselves. We're running on a bunch of caffeine and 3 hours of sleep, and we have 2,100 deadlines, and how is that healthy? And unfortunately, a lot of indigenous women die, too young in this movement. And so I just want to say that I am humbled and honored to be on this incredible panel with such amazing powerhouse indigenous women, femmes, and I just want to encourage all of you to stand in solidarity with all of us, because it is needed. Right now, it is needed to be in solidarity, and it is needed to be in solidarity in a good way, in a matriarchal way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire, and I really appreciate you also bringing attention to the fact that, things are more complex. Things are more complex. We're trying to dismantle a very harmful system that we are participating in and bring healing to ourselves, and we have to do things in a very intersectional, multifaceted way, and I really appreciate you bringing out the nuance of that. And also, so many of the indigenous women that we work with are, under threat constantly, and yet are being upheld as a solution, but then having to be under attack, and it's too much. And we all need to step in and understand that complexity, so thank you so much. And with that, I would like to hand the floor to Gia. Thank you so much, Gia.
Hello. Thank you so much, Osprey, for the introduction and for holding space for us to come here once again. I see a lot of familiar faces, and it fills my heart with joy to know that this specific space has been rejuvenated with energy time and time again. Thank you for your participations. It really touches my heart every time I hear that the perspectives and cosmovision that I grew up with are the same that other indigenous communities and women grew up with, because I know that we're connected in more ways than we can express. And coming together is reinforcing how right our vision is, because it is deeply rooted in the cosmovision of communities across the world. My name is Xie Bastida. I come from the Otomi peoples in the highlands of central Mexico. My community is about 10,000 people, and we used to be a fishing community before, sadly, our lagoon dried up because of Mexico City's extractivism of water. It was dry for 10 years before the water came back. But my community had already changed to building furniture. I think I share that story all the time because for me, it shows the importance of our immediate ecosystem to not only our biocultural heritage, but our practices and the way that our own microeconomies function, which the word economy shouldn't be used, right? But it's the way that we relate and work with our land to produce things that are just enough for us to thrive. I want to start by sharing a thought that I've been having lately and ask you the question of what community means to you. Because when I think of community, I think of sitting around a fire, youth and elders sharing wisdom, sharing experiences. When I think of community, I think of little kids running around, my grandmother in the kitchen making food. I think of when family comes together. And I started to think that community means such different things to different people. If an influencer gets asked that question, they're going to say my followers are my community. If a politician gets asked that question, they're going to say my cabinet might be my community. If you ask that question to the Secretary General, he might say my advisors are my community. If you ask that to an oil company, their shareholders are their community. And what does it mean to protect your community also has different definitions across. For me, protecting my community means that my kids are going to know Otomi. It means that my kids are going to have an indigenous name. It means that my kids are going to be able to bathe in the river that I never got to bathe in because of how polluted it is. And so we need a collective definition of community because we are all protecting our communities. And some protection of some communities are harmful for others. And I think the reason why this shook me so much when I understood it is because I realized that other people weren't thinking of sitting next to me with a fire in the middle when I talked about my own community in these type of stages at places like the United Nations, at meetings that we have across the environmental justice movement. And so we need to get to the point where when we talk about knowledge sharing, it's about that redefinition of community. I also want to touch on your point of pain and love because I recently heard something that also turned my perspective on what Indigenous representation is at this type of events. I'm talking about the United Nations Permanent Framework on Indigenous Issues. I was just on an event right before this that a lot of us were there. And the first thing that I said was, why do we call it a permanent forum on Indigenous issues when it should be a permanent forum on Indigenous perspectives or solutions or cosmovision? Because we are kind of acknowledging that we will permanently have issues when we are trying to turn the page from issues to healing and reconnection. We cannot deny the harm that has been done to our communities, but we can also not deny that we are already healing our communities and healing the deep wounds that have been caused by the colonizers that are now turning into new colonialism. A lot of the climate solutions that exist today are being co-opted. When we talk about protecting forests, when we talk about protecting carbon sinks, there are banks buying huge amounts of timber to get carbon credits and get tax write-offs of millions of dollars. Private companies should not be allowed to buy forests. Private companies should not be allowed to capitalize on carbon sinks. Every protection of biodiversity should be given to people who know how to take care of that ecosystem. And I know somebody mentioned parks and how the parks have been a huge issue, and now this new way of climate solutions are starting to be a big issue. So I love also that you said, how do we bring things like the Green New Deal to our own places and translate it to our own local legislation, and that's the thing that needs to happen, but also in reverse. Something else that shook me from the panel that we were at before is that it was 6 women and 1 man. And the men said, I'm going to try to defeat the speeches of the women. And why are we still using that type of violent language when we're sharing knowledge? And he is representing indigenous peoples as well. And he cannot come onto a panel and say, I'm going to defeat them because I think that they spoke well. And then he said the climate crisis is a man-made issue, and people in the audience shook their heads, and I could hear their thoughts saying, it's not a man-made issue, it is an imperialist, capitalistic made issue that indigenous peoples have been pushing back against. So there's a lot of changes in our language, in our vision, in our frameworks that are so small and so doable and so effective. And those are the things that we need to start advocating for at these levels in our own circles around the fire. And I think we are finally at a point where we're healing everything that has been severed.
Thank you so much, Ye. I don't know who that person was, but I don't think that was an important comment either, to say the least. So I really appreciate all the comments that you've all made, and we'd like to give you all like 3-minute responses before we close out the panel to start in the order that you spoke. And if you wanted to comment on any of the other speakers, sort of be in conversation with the comments that they made, or anything else that you'd like to add now that you've heard from each other. And I did want to just say, we wanted to also announce today, since you gave me the opportunity, that we do have a report from WECAN that is called The Gender and Racial Impacts of the Fossil Fuel Industry in North America and Complicit Financial Institutions. And you can find this on our website. And the reason I mention it is there's an entire section specifically on how indigenous territories are being impacted by fossil fuel industry specifically, and how we give recommendations how governments and financial institutions should not be ignoring treaty rights, indigenous rights, and that the area where land is being protected, 80% of all the biodiversity left on Earth is in indigenous lands and territories. And this is why we must uplift FPIC and listen to indigenous women leaders who are telling us this is the last of the water, the last of the forests, the last of the sacred lands. And we need to ensure that governments and financial institutions and corporations hear us and start respecting international standards like the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So thank you for bringing those issues up, and you have the floor, Ruth.
So I guess with these last few minutes, I first, of course, must express my deep gratitude to all the folks sitting up here. It is so powerful to feel so united as you should, in so many of our experiences, but also in so many of our, in so much of our clarity towards solutions. When folks often think about my homelands in Alaska, the circumpolar north, the Arctic, they think about either headlines they've heard about the Arctic melting, or they think about a vast expanse of nothingness, emptiness. It is true that the Arctic is warming at 2 to 4 times the rate as the rest of the world. Our people are facing the climate crisis first and worst, along with our island relatives. And what does that mean for us? It means that we are also prototyping our solutions, because at the same time as our Arctic ice is melting and we are having challenges hunting on the ice, at the same time as our marine mammals are migrating away from where they have always traditionally been, at the same time that my homelands are burning up in wildfires at record-setting rates each and every year, we are also, as Indigenous people, adapting, because our climate crisis started when colonization began. We have always been adapting to a changing climate, and now it is our solutions that will lead us through this new trauma. In the past year, Typhoon Merbok hit Western Alaska with devastating consequences. dozens of our communities, particularly Yupik communities, were hit so hard. People lost their homes, they lost their boats, they lost their ability to gather food, and that was without even considering the difficulties that our people had with changing marine mammal migration and changing rates of salmon, which are our first food source. In Alaska, just for context, most villages do not have broadband, let alone grocery stores. The villages that do have an AC, you can buy milk for $12 a gallon. And so we don't have the option to adapt to colonization by integrating or assimilating, nor would we choose to. But instead, we adapt to our changing climates, and we step up for one another when we are facing the severe consequences of the climate crisis. And so in the wake of Typhoon Merbok, we were able to mobilize massive community aid across the state. And now one of the forefront projects that I'm really proud to be working on is the resurrection of our traditional trade networks between Alaska Native tribal nations. We are hoping to establish a food distribution network which will allow us to distribute traditional subsistence foods from one region of Alaska where there is bounty to other regions where they are being deprived of their access to food. And so when we think about, facing climate impacts, it's not just a matter of, the tragedy that is occurring on our homelands. It is also a matter of trusting that our indigenous peoples will survive through it. And frankly, in my opinion, indigenous peoples, we know our lands first and best. We know what our lands love. We know how to speak to them. We know how to pray to them. But we are also our land's best ecologists, anthropologists, meteorologists. We are the leading climate scientists of our homelands. We'll be fine. It's all of you who will need us. And so as we resurrect these traditional economies, as we deeply invest in sharing our traditional knowledges, it is not from a place of victimhood that we come to the United Nations. We're the richest people in the world. We have our ancestors and all that they carried forward behind us. And so when I consider, founding our actions on care, it's our cultures that will lead our way. When we face the climate crisis, it is our cultures that will allow us to persevere, and we welcome all others who are able to honor and respect and engage reciprocally with our cultures that will show us the way forward.
Thank you so much. Learning a lot from sisters with each other. In Nepal, we just like for the climate solution, in endangered indigenous people who live in the forest, they gather roots and tubers and herb in the forest. And when they kill, when they want to eat meat, then they don't kill elderly, sick, pregnant. They want to save. So they, before killing, they pray the forest god, and they ask, they say sorry that for survival we have to eat. And when they gather roots and tuber also, they live for the another year for the little bit roots under the ground. And in my ethnic group in the mountain region, for the food security, what we do is that we dig the ground and we put all the vegetable, meat under the ground because it's a very cold place, no? So in the time of need, so we can take it out, and with that way also we preserve. And in some indigenous community like Rai, Limbu, what they do is that they look the healthy tree. And when the child is born, the umbilical cord, they put in the bamboo and they hang it on the healthy tree and pray. And it is believed, the tree is believed it's a sacred, so nobody can cut that tree. That way also the forest is protected. And also in the highly marginalized community, Chepang, in their community also, during the marriage ceremony, they give a daughter a fruit tree called Churi. So with that, the tree is saved also, preserved also, and they can sell the fruit, make milk out from the fruit, and from the seed they can make oil of that also. So there are a lot of things how our indigenous knowledge practices are still is going on in the village. And also in the mountain region, in the once a year, the yak blood, because the yak brings the herb, and many people go to the mountain region to drink the fresh blood of a yak, and so it's just like a donating of blood also. That when we donate blood, again we get our blood is again, no, what you say, again in the body. In the same way, the yak is not, he or she won't die, but again their species will grow healthy. And there are a lot of practices, lot of things to say, but no time, you know, no time, so really sad.
So I just want to close with that we have to hold space for grief. You know, that the grief, climate grief, is something that we're experiencing all the time. And when we're in this flight or fight mode, when we're on the constant go, when we're looking at the direct impacts every single day, and unfortunately, like, there are so many people here whose homelands are under direct attack, and I just want to send prayers out, and I want to hold space for that we don't give ourselves time to grieve. We don't give ourselves the space to grieve for our fallen comrades, for our earth, for you know, and several times on pipeline fights, it's devastating, and it's heartbreaking. However, like our sister has said, we've lived through so many apocalypses. We've lived through so many end of the worlds. You know, our world has ended in so many ways and so many times, and yet we have always fought to remain here. We have fought for our language, we have fought for our culture, we have fought for our identity, and we're still here. After hundreds of years of colonization, we are here as Indigenous women, and we are standing in our strength. And in that strength is also our joy, our pain, and our love. All of that is being an Indigenous matriarch. We can always come back to ourselves. I say come back to our spirit in a time of war. We've got to learn to come back to our spirit. And, you know, one of the ways that I do it is with song, but also sometimes water. Water is a very good way to come back to spirit. And I always encourage people, if there's a way to go to natural water, spend time with the water. Learn the songs and learn the stories. Spend time with water. Spend time outside. Heal your heart. And spend time with that grief, but let it go in the end. Release it. And be there for each other. Be there. Be a good relative for each other. Be in love. Thank you.
Hello. Well, I know that I feel so full right now, full of my spirit feeling strong, and that is the best feeling we can have, because we know that when we push against something and we fight against something, it drains you, but when you love something, it fills you up. We have talked a lot about time, and I want to share something that I wrote about how time has felt for me lately, hoping that it can ease some of the tensions that I think we have all felt lately. So time has felt strange. It goes by too fast. It doesn't let me hold it and caress it. It doesn't wait for me to be ready. Time is running too fast, very fast. Time is sweating. Her heart is beating. It doesn't know where it's going. Time has a knot in her stomach. Time wants to know if she should run slower, if she should walk, if she should sleep. But then we would run faster and we would change the world because there would be time to save her. But time is mad at Mother Earth. For so long, time was huge. Change would happen by centuries, by millennia. Now changes happen in seconds, in minutes. Time is tired. If Earth wants to be helped, she will have to slow down. Time wants to be able to keep up, rest, breathe, and smile. Time wants to be held, and she wants to be loved. So I wrote this because I have been feeling that we don't have enough time for things when we have to make time for everything. We have to be able to hold time. We have to be able to give us the space to change mindsets, to change the way that we have been dealing with the climate crisis. I know we have the 2030 deadline, and somebody turned it into days. I think it's around 3,000 days. And if you think of the next 3,000 days as a non-stop campaign to stop carbon emissions, disconnection, however you want to call it, it feels like we're not going to get there because every day goes by too fast. But now I want everybody to think of your schedule, of your calendar, and imagine you have nothing. For the next 10 years, you have nothing on your calendar. What would you do with your life? What would you do with the world? What would you build? What would you bring? How would you carry yourself? And now think of all of the events and meetings and places to be that you have to go to in the next 10 years with that changed mindset of the fact that you can build something new every time you show up. My professor puts it really well. He said, the world only changes when people go to meetings. So we have to keep attending things that are going to keep moving us forward, but always touching back with our hearts, with our community, with our soil, with our water. And I think then we're going to feel that not only do we have enough time to change things, but we also have enough resilience, spirit, and heart to get there.
Thank you all so much for your incredible time, wisdom, work, and I hope that you walk from this space feeling nurtured, and we certainly do feel nurtured and wiser from your words, and thank you so much. Beautiful, beautiful panel. Thank you all.
Quickly, shamelessly promote that I'm doing a panel tomorrow. It's going to be at the New School. It's Indigenous Women Facing Climate Catastrophe as Water Protectors of Territorial Health. We have brought in some sisters from Brazil who are going to be talking about the displacement that carbon trading has been doing. So please come tomorrow. There are flyers. I kind of put them out and about. So please come in tomorrow at the New School.
Thank you. Any other plugs for anything from the panelists? It's fine to go ahead and do a shout out if you want to. Okay, well, a lot. Go ahead.
I just want to say, Mother Earth is not for sale.
Yes. Maybe we could all say that together because we are not into false solutions, no market mechanisms, no carbon offsets, Indigenous people's rights, respect for Indigenous sovereignty, and self-determination. That's what we want. Stopping pollution at the source, no carbon offsets. But let's say that. Lead us in it, please.
Mother Earth is not for sale.
Mother Earth is not for sale. Mother Earth is not for sale. One more more time. Mother Earth,
Mother Earth not for sale.
GA, go ahead. I think you have a shower.
No, I just wanted to say that the 22nd is Earth Day, and a reminder to always say Earth Day should not only have one day, it's every day, and that is the livelihood that we have to be leading, moving forward and remembering backwards. So,
Thank you.
She said leave. Yeah, I just need to step out for a second. Oh, yeah, thanks. Yes, I'm good. Just choked on water a little bit. Yeah, just keep it going and then we'll get okay.
Coming from the space that I'm in, misconnections on like where to lift up like my stuff.
Our next panel is going to start like in 5 minutes. So we're just going to give like 5 minutes and we'll start.
Yes, when you go to the Earth Building, it's introduced
Oh
to
my gosh, yeah, yeah.
climate pollution by 2030.
I have had
Electricity, cars, and food.
with the and
SPI
yeah,
just introduced it with my county.
yeah, I haven't heard of it.
And
Yeah.
we have turning on
But I,
the
yeah.
nation for the country. Yeah, for the nation. The federal, but the full name is called the Earth Act to Stop Climate Pollution by 2030. We call it Earth Act for short. Earthbill.org is the website. It's all about
Should I restart it? Because I know it restarts every 60 minutes. It might be coming on. Yeah, it was full.
So maybe we can turn it on. Yeah, a few.
End the live here. You want to post it to, like, you want to keep it, right?
Yeah.
Like, stored.
Yeah.
So you just go back here, live, and then press it.
Panel number 2.
Yeah, she told me to put the...
Her tickets were 7.
And then it's ready to go. So just to start it, you just press that. Should I start it now? I mean, I feel like if we... Hers is running, so I'll probably start one. Yep, so at 6:30 I have to go, but I can wait until 6:30.
I'm good. You're good?
Can we go ahead and get the cameras for the next year?
Thanks.
We're looking for just... Dr. Dena'ina, Michelle, Maho. While we're getting the panelists settled, Ashley, you can go ahead and show the video. Why don't you show the video and then that'll give people a chance for all the folks to come on up.
End of the Mississippi River, there is a place, the Łchav'aya, called Bhattachan, place of many tongues, a place of many languages, known better as the global port city colonizers rebranded as New Orleans, where a crossroads of waterways provides access to sites of sacred trade, stewarded by the ancestors of these lands and waters. Generations have been weathering discrimination, land grabs, hurricanes, oil spill disasters, and the catastrophic side effects of man's manipulations, flooding our ways of life. Our intertribal alliance, Łchav'aya, People of the Sacred Medicine Trail, is working to reestablish old trade routes and networks, adapting and co-designing paths for tradeways for the future, ways to exchange medicine, food, and skills to support biodiversity and sovereignty.
This is a really exciting project that is rising up like a shining light out of one of the most polluted areas in all of Turtle Island, of all of the United States, an area that has been called Cancer Alley because of how much fossil fuel pollution is in this part of the United States, and instead show a place of regeneration and healing led by Indigenous farmers who are building community, sharing stories of the land that are lifting up a very different vision of how we can move forward in this time of great transformation where we have a need to be able to live with each other in the land in a very different way.
We believe that it is crucial for us to protect and reclaim our relationships with our sacred homelands and waters in order to restore the natural balance, so the intelligence of the system can be respected for our communities to survive in deep collaboration with the nature, like our grandmothers before us, preparing for the unknown by putting our hands in the ground and our hearts into the work needed to strengthen decentralized systems of support, from mutual aid to intentional investment in building circular economies.
I think as we look at the multiple crises of the climate crisis and environmental degradation and colonization and environmental racism, that one of the most important things that we could be doing is to really support food sovereignty programs and food security, a way to really ensure cultural survival and cultural practices as we see storytelling taking place, and the story of the seeds, and the story of the communities, and all these different peoples that came together on these trade routes. When we talk about what we're going to do about the climate crisis, what are we going to do about colonization, what are we going to do about respecting Indigenous peoples and Indigenous peoples' rights, this is a response.
Our gardeners are on a journey together, collectively learning and sharing skills, hosting workshops on the spectrum of topics, from composting to multimedia storytelling to medicine making, seed harvesting, and more. The Łchav'aya network of gardens connect us to each other, to traditional territories, to the places we call home, to the earth, and to the planetary work that is so urgently needed. But we know the plants carry the lessons to help us face the intersectional toxic challenges of injustices tied to colonial practices, perpetuated by multinational petrochemical corporations fueling the climate crisis. We are Umma, Shata, Osage, Lakota, Muskogee, Eastern Siouan, Sichungu Lakota, and Creole, femme and non-binary gardeners, seeding and growing and building across the Gulf South to defend and protect and to restore our lands and waters in the Mississippi River Delta and within the ancestral territories of the Łchav'aya and Muskogee.
And it's one of the ways that we begin to really honor the call from Indigenous peoples for land back, for rematriation of the land. And the dream of this project is a seventh generation project that will go on for many, many generations.
To our second panel. We're really honored to be here for Indigenous Women Upholding Indigenous Rights and Knowledge and Leading Climate Solutions. And the film you just saw is one of the weekend projects in the Gulf South. We're really honored to work with an amazing group of Indigenous farmers and supporting that land back movement. And before I begin the next panel, we have an announcement from one of our dear partners, Amazon Watch, about a release of some important work. And so we're going to have that announcement and we'll begin the second part. Please welcome Moira Earth.
Thanks, Osprey, and thanks so much for giving me a few minutes to announce. Just yesterday, Amazon Watch, in partnership with many other organizations and advocates, published a toolkit for investors on Indigenous rights. So we've been hearing in these panels, and I think we're about to hear more about, and we've heard during the forum the past few days about how companies around the world are not respecting Indigenous peoples or their rights. And these companies are able to carry out these harmful practices because they get money poured into them from investors, pension funds, and asset managers, and banks, and the like. And it's pretty clear that if they're pouring money into these kinds of companies, they are failing on their duty to respect the rights of Indigenous peoples. And they're also harming the planet and, frankly, their own financial portfolios because of the resistance of Indigenous peoples who have been so successful at stopping so many destructive pipelines, mines, and the like. And so we worked with Emil Gualinga, who is Quechua from Sariaco in the Ecuadorian Amazon, to put together this toolkit. We got input from Indigenous advocates, from investors, and for example, even the City of New York's pension fund, which has been doing a lot of social responsible investing, provided input. Yeah, we wanted to let everyone know about it and urge you to take a look at it, give us feedback that you might have, and if you feel so moved, share it with any investors or advocates that you know who could make use of it. My colleagues, a couple of colleagues have these postcards which has a QR code where you can access it. It's available online at respectingindigenousrights.org. Yeah, that's all. Thank you so much. And again, welcome feedback that you might have.
Thank you so much. And I think just for those of you who don't know, yesterday there was a session inside the UN that was really focused on this finance piece, because we must shut down the financial industry that is involved in financing these extractive industries, whether it's mining or fossil fuels or building more dams. This is one way that we can support Indigenous peoples, is to go after the financial institutions and shut down the money pipeline. So anyways, there's lots of work on that, and you can look at our websites on that topic. Other colleagues are in the room who are also doing that work. And with that, I want to go ahead and introduce our next panelists. We're going to be hearing, I'll be introducing them in the order that they're speaking. We're going to hear from President Whitney Gravel from the Bay Mills Indian Community, Chair of the Department of Interior Committee, and Commissioner of the Michigan Advisory Council on Environmental Justice from Turtle Island, USA. And then we're going to be hearing from Josephina Trunki. She is Shuar, and she is the first woman president of the Shuar Bhattachan organization from the Ecuadorian Amazon. So really glad to have you here. We'll also be hearing from Michelle Woodhouse. She is Métis. She is Water Program Manager, Environmental Defense from Turtle Island, Canada. Thank you, Michelle. And then we'll be hearing from Maho Andrade Huerta. She is Quechua, and she's the youth leader of the Quechua people of Napo. She is Land is Life's Latin American Program Assistant, and she's also from Ecuador. So please let's give them a warm welcome. And before I hand the floor over, I just wanted to also say that I had the honor of being with both President Whitney Gravel and Michelle Woodhouse. We did an impromptu Line 5, Stop Line 5, which you're going to hear about, action right outside here in front of the UN, and we will be posting about that tomorrow. And so anyways, that was good trouble that was made earlier today. And with that, I'm going to hand the floor to President Whitney Gravel. Thank you.
Is this on? Ani Bojo, Giwedi Nagabo Quain Dishnakas, Ganushnakani Nindonjaba. My name is the woman who stands in the north. My English name is Whitney Gravel, and I am an Anishinaabe woman from Ganushnakani, which is also known as Place of the Pike, or our English name is Bay Mills Indian Community. And before I start, I just want to survey the crowd real quick. First question, does anyone work for Enbridge Energy? Okay, good. Second question, can you raise your hand if you're familiar with Line 5 or if you've heard about it? That's wonderful. So Bay Mills Indian Community is a sovereign tribal nation located in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Next slide, please. And we have been in the battle on Line 5 for more than a decade now. And ultimately that fight started back in 2010 with the Kalamazoo River spill on Line 6B, where for more than 17 hours oil was leaking into the Kalamazoo River and was not detected by Enbridge Energy, nor was there any response action by the federal government or the state government at that time. And our relatives that live down in the Nottawasapi Huron Band of Potawatomi still suffer the effects of that oil spill even today. They cannot hunt on their land, they cannot eat from their land, and they cannot fish from their land because of this oil spill. And so what we have come to determine since Line 6B happened is everyone collectively asked two questions when that spill occurred. The first one was, there's pipelines in Michigan, and then the second question was, where are they? And we all discovered simultaneously the Line 5 dual pipelines, which run more than 600 miles through the state of Michigan, and more critically run through the Straits of Mackinac, which this image here depicts. This image comes from the University of Michigan, and it depicts what a spill would cause, the type of environmental harm and degradation in the Straits of Mackinac and in the state of Michigan. This is an image of the pipeline and where it traverses through the state of Michigan. And you will see in each of the green dots where a spill has already occurred along the Line 5 dual pipelines. More than 1.1 million gallons of crude petroleum products have already spilled in the state of Michigan, which is more than the Kalamazoo River oil spill combined. And the Kalamazoo River oil spill at the time in 2010 was considered the largest inland oil spill. And so Line 5 has already caused more damage than what Line 6B caused to our relatives. These images here show the current state of Line 5. It was built in 1953. It is more than 70 years old and engineered only for 50 years. And so it is already 20 years past its engineered design lifespan. And you will see corroded measures on the pipeline. You will see removed anchor braces. And then you will see in this slide here what happened in 2018, where we experienced the first anchor strike of the Line 5 dual pipelines. Line 5 was designed to sit on two corners of bedrock in the Straits, and it is suspended over a large trench in the Great Lakes. And so when it was designed, it was meant to move with the current. and flow back and forth, which is dangerous to think about anyways, that it's susceptible to the energy and the waves that exist within the Great Lakes. When it was struck by an anchor, we barely avoided a catastrophic oil spill in the Great Lakes. And then in 2020, it was hit again. And we need to do everything that we can in order to protect the Great Lakes. So why did Bay Mills get involved? Bay Mills Indian Community is a signatory to the 1836 Treaty of Washington. And within that treaty, we carved out protections, which includes the usual privileges of occupancy for our people. This black border is our treaty ceded territory, and Line 5 runs directly through the heart of that. These are photos of fishermen within our community who exercise the treaty right, and this is a photo of my grandfather who was instrumental in making sure that our treaty right was recognized by federal court. And you will see here in these photo depictions that our people are willing to arm themselves in order to protect themselves with the treaty right. When this treaty right was finally recognized by federal courts, we were reminded of the wisdom that our ancestors had the first time they negotiated this treaty. They carved out the usual privileges of occupancy because they understood that our relationship with the land and with the water was the most precious relationship that we could possibly ever have. It also implicates the heart of Turtle Island in the Straits of Mackinac, and as the largest freshwater body resource, we understand that our creation stories are tied to this area and tied to the rest of North America so that we can continue to be able to live and survive. We need water to be able to live, but water does not need us. And so it's extremely important that we're not only uplifting the rights of Indigenous peoples, but that we're also uplifting the rights of water and the rights of all of creation that came before us. In our teachings and in that line of creation, men and women were created last, not because we are the most important, but because we are the least important. And we rely on all that came before us in order to be able to survive. I have more slides after this, but I want to end on this one because these photos are photos I took of my community members, my tribal citizens back at home. This is my cousin Jade holding a whitefish, and I've never seen someone be so happy about holding like a giant slimy fish. And that's what it means to us. So the treaty right to fish is not just the physical act of fishing. We sing with fish, we play with fish, we laugh with fish, we dance with fish. And what that's meant to mean is that we carry our treaty rights within us, we carry them in our relationships with the land, and that's how we understand who we are as Indigenous people. So, Chiniquich.
Thank you so much, President Whitney Gravel. And, I just wanted to mention before we go to the next speaker that this fight on Line 5 is so serious for all the reasons that you described, and you had mentioned Enbridge. And a lot of us were involved, perhaps some of you in the room, with the fight against Enbridge with Line 3. And we've already witnessed the terrible actor that Enbridge is, and all the atrocities and violations that we thought were going to happen on Line 3 did. And so it's really also outrageous that this company is now still being allowed to move forward with Line 5. Of course, there's permitting, and we're all fighting with government agencies to stop it. There's a lot of fight going on here, led by Indigenous leaders. But just the fact that it's the same company and they're playing the same rule book and saying the same thing, it's got to stop. It has got to stop. We already know the harm of this company. And please know we're dedicated always to working with you. Thank you for your leadership on this fight and protecting our water. And now I would like to hand the floor to Josephina Tuki, who has come from such a long distance to be with us. We're so honored to have you be here with us. Thank you.
Buenas tardes. Quiero agradecer a la organizadora de UNPFII, que es netamente para llevar esos trabajos tan lindos, para tener un contacto, acercamiento en este espacio. a nivel internacional para poder intercambiar y conocer las realidades que actualmente vivimos, mujeres en la planeta Tierra. Por historia, las culturas, los pueblos indígenas, venimos en la planeta y nos asentamos en nuestros propios territorios, que es nuestra autonomía. Los saberes ancestrales como pueblos originarios lo hacemos desde el territorio. Gobernamos en nuestro territorio. Sin territorios no podemos hablar de la autonomía y de autodeterminación. El buen gobierno, el buen vivir es desde el territorio. Me llamo...
Okay. Good afternoon. I want to thank the organizers and WeCan for putting this together and for bringing us here together so we can share and share knowledge and information. We as Indigenous peoples in our territories have ancestral knowledge that was given to us from our creators, and without our territory, without our connection with our territory, we cannot survive.
Mi nombre es Shuar Josefina Tunki, vengo de la Amazonía, del Ecuador, de la Cordillera del Cóndor. Mi nombre Shuar es Naken, quiere decir firmeza. La Amazonía, nosotros como cultura Shuar, como pueblo Shuar, venimos protegiendo, conservando desde 500, mucho más años atrás. Somos cultura milenaria, no podemos decir que vivimos 500 años de resistencia, no. Somos una cultura milenaria, sino que la conquista, la llegada de los españoles en América, lo dieron ese sentido. Nosotros las mujeres conocemos a la planeta Tierra. Como mujeres indígenas conocemos cómo sostener, cómo proteger, cómo sobrevivir. Sabemos los cantos, sabemos las historias. Las culturas no vivíamos de escasez, porque nosotros sabemos mucho más antes, teníamos muchas semillas, porotos, maní, plátanos, yuca y otros que dan en nuestros territorios, que son zonas tropicales y productivas.
So my name is Josefina Tunki. I'm from the Shuar people of the Ecuadorian Amazon, what we call the mountain range of the condor. And in Shuar, my name means strength. As Shuar, we protect our territory, and we've done that for not just 500 years since the conquest, but for millennium. We are a culture of resistance and survival that goes way back before the conquest. And as Indigenous women, we know how to protect, how to survive. We know our traditional songs, our traditional stories, and we know that in the past we didn't live with a lack of resources. We had seeds, we had plantains, we had yucca, we had peanuts. Thank you. We had all the things that we needed.
Por la influencia de muchas costumbres externas, hemos perdido mucha sabiduría actualmente, y que nuestra generación actual, muchos ya no hablan el idioma, ya no practican las costumbres, porque la moneda es lo que nos ha influenciado muchísimo en nuestro territorio. En medio de eso están las empresas. Las empresas no deberían de llegar en nuestros territorios. tengo que decirlo claro. El culpable es Fondo Monetario Internacional, porque ellos los financian. Ellos los financian a estas grandes industrias, Coca-Cola Cyclade, que también concesionó, hizo instalación hidroeléctrica en la Amazonía norte del Ecuador. La empresa canadiense, la empresa china, la empresa australiana, está en esos territorios. Ahí todo está concesionado, no hay ningún espacio libre, pero allí estamos nosotros resistiendo.
So because of because of the influence of outside actors, we've been slowly losing our customs and our languages, and you know, frankly, money coming into our communities has had a really bad influence. And in the midst of all of that, we're seeing all these companies come in. They shouldn't be coming into our territory, and they're coming because they're getting funding from the likes of the International Monetary Fund. Companies like Sinclair, which is a hydroelectric dam in the north of the Ecuadorian Amazon. We also see Canadian companies and Chinese companies, and companies from all over that are invading our territory.
Pocos adultos, hombres y mujeres que quedamos, hoy nosotros estamos retomando nuestros conocimientos propios. Estamos creando una educación propia en nuestros territorios, donde que son profesoras y profesores nuestros ancestros. No necesitamos a los externos, porque nosotros tenemos nuestras costumbres propias. Nuestros ancestros tenían platos, tenían sus vestidos, conocían las técnicas de cultivo, conocían las técnicas de abundancia. Un cazador, hombre, no iba a andar todo el día, entonaba un canto, madrugaba 2-3 horas, ya tenía carne suficiente para abastecer a su familia, regresaba entre las 10-11 de la mañana. Y eso era para muchos días.
So the few adults that are left in our community, we've been taking back our knowledge and our customs, and we've been building our own education system. We don't need education from outside because we know that our ancestors had techniques and practices that allowed them to survive and thrive. Techniques of how they cultivated crops, how they had abundance. So for example, the hunters, you know, they would get up early in the morning, they would sing before going out, and then they would be gone just 2 or 3 hours, and they would come back with more than enough meat for days.
Mi abuela, como ancestra, yo viví con mi abuelita. Ella me llevaba en la chacra o en la huerta, como lo llamen. Solo una mata de yuca llenábamos chanquina. Pero ella no se metía por meterse en su chacra. Ella cantaba, entonaba a Dios Anunqui, que dé alimentos. Cosechaba lo variado y regresábamos. Es como ser ahora que nos servimos tantos productos, frutas, hortalizas, hojitas, todo, y ese compuesto es nutritivo. Igual era antiguamente.
So my grandmother, I lived with my grandmother when I was growing up, and she had a garden, and she wouldn't just sow the seeds. She would sing to them, and she would sing to our gods, asking them to grant abundance and to bless the crops.
Ahora en la actualidad, quiero decir lo siguiente. Nosotros los indígenas, al menos en mi territorio en Shuar, Arruta, en la Amazonía del Ecuador, nosotros nos alimentamos productos sin químicos, en toda la Amazonía, no solo en mi territorio. Porque nosotros sabemos que con químicos nos vamos a enfermar, pero sí nos ha dado mucha pena lo que se cultiva, los productos, alimentos monocultivos que son fumigados para la exportación, especialmente que se comercializa en otros países. Esos contienen bastantes químicos y lamentablemente la humanidad consume eso. Y así, igual como vienen las gaseosas en nuestros territorios, también contienen químicos. Eso es muy triste, lamentoso, y la cual debemos de pensar cómo prevenir.
Now I want to say, you know, in these days, we, indigenous people in Ecuador, we live without chemicals. We are able to sustain ourselves without food that's contaminated with chemicals. But then we see that there's so much food being produced elsewhere that's full of pesticides and other chemicals, monocrops that are fumigated for export, and those are just filled with things that are harming us and harming humanity. Humanity is consuming these things that are so harmful for them. It's true also of, you know, sodas and soft drinks and all that stuff. And we should really think about if that's how we want to be treating our bodies.
Por eso es que actualmente las mujeres de pueblos indígenas autónomos y también los pueblos del Caribe exponemos nuestros cuerpos ante el extractivismo, ante las amenazas, porque los hombres líderes ya no se confían, pero las mujeres sí somos de palabra, muy firmes y sinceras. Estamos en pie de lucha a nivel Latinoamérica y a nivel internacional, de acuerdo como escuché en los foros. Muchísimas gracias. Buenas tardes.
Bravo.
And so that's why indigenous women throughout the region, throughout Latin America and the Caribbean, we put our bodies on the line to fight against extractivism. You know, and a lot of the men in leadership in our communities, they can't be trusted to do that. It's up to us as women, and I think that's true of many of the women I've heard speak today and in the forum around the world. We are the ones who are putting our bodies on the line to oppose extractivism. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And now I want to hand the floor to Michelle Woodhouse, and I want to thank you so much, Josefina, for your leadership.
Hello, everyone. Tansi, I am Michelle Woodhouse. I am a member of the Métis Nation, which is an indigenous nation in Canada. And my mother's side of the family is from a place called Łchav'aya, which means Spirit of the Lake, and its English name is also Lac St. Anne. That's not too far from Edmonton, Alberta. Alberta is also where, I'm sure many of you know this, but where the tar sands are. And there's a lot of issues going on over there with that. There was actually just a huge release from Imperial Oil of from the tailings ponds into the Athabaskan River, and it's really devastating what's been happening. And this is an area in Turtle Island that's essentially being offered up as a sacrifice zone to the fossil fuel industry. And on my father's side, my family is British Canadian. We're from Southern Ontario, and I live in Toronto. I'm based in Toronto, Ontario. So about Line 5, there's a lot to say. President Gravel has already outlined a lot of really important things about this topic. I came into this work just over 2 years ago when some folks from the U.S., different environmental groups, as well as President Gravel, had reached out across the border looking for some allies up in so-called Canada, because A lot of the fight has just been going on south of the Medicine Line in the States. And I actually first learned about Line 5 in 2018 when I was working for an organization called the International Joint Commission. They are a governing body of the Great Lakes, and it's comprised of the US and Canada. And the purpose of the International Joint Commission is to make sure that something called the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, all of the objectives, are being properly implemented. So anyways, long story short, I worked there and found out about Line 5 because I was analyzing different public comments that were provided to the Great Lakes Public Forum, and had no idea. As somebody that really loves and values the Great Lakes, I was shocked to learn that I hadn't known about this really dangerous pipeline before, and it was because all of these people had showed up to this Great Lakes Public Forum and were expressing their concerns. A lot of tribal nation members were expressing their concerns. And I remember at the time when I asked the International Joint Commission like what they had been doing on this, because I figured that they must be doing something, it really wasn't much. There'd barely been even like any research done into the matter. And so I was just really confused, like what was going on in Canada? Why were we not taking this seriously? It's very scary that this pipeline is crossing through the heart of the Great Lakes, carrying some of the dirtiest tar sands oil, percent of Turtle Island and North America. This is also 21% of the globe's surface freshwater. The Great Lakes are the world's largest surface freshwater system. So that you cannot overstate the importance of the Great Lakes. So fast forward to when the tribes had reached out, and as well as some U.S. folks had reached out to me, I immediately knew that we had to work on this topic or this issue. And since then, I've been trying my best to carry out advocacy at the federal level with different folks in the Canadian government, but also just trying to raise awareness to the public about what is going on, because a lot of Canadians are unaware that this pipeline is crossing through the Great Lakes and is such a threat. So I've been trying to advocate up in Canada for the closure of the pipeline, standing in solidarity with Anishinaabekans south of the border, and all of the U.S. Non-Indigenous allies that are also working to shut this down. And I've also been working with the Anishinaabe Nation, which represents 39 First Nations in Ontario, to help support them in offering capacity so that they can engage in this fight as well, because a lot of First Nations have so many issues going on, but this is certainly one that is top of mind for the Anishinaabe Nation. And something for me that's really stood out since the beginning, since I got involved in this, is as somebody that's not Anishinaabe, but that's grown up in the Great Lakes Basin, and the Great Lakes are very near and dear to me, I acknowledge that the Anishinaabe Nation is the original stewards and the people who have governed the Great Lakes since time immemorial for over 10,000 years, but to traceable knowledge, 10,000 years. And so the Anishinaabe Nation really should be the ones that we're listening to when we're making decisions about protecting the Great Lakes. And unfortunately, the colonial borders have tried to separate the Anishinaabe Nation across countries, states, provinces, but it is one nation. As you can see up here, it's literally overlaid with the Great Lakes Basin, and then even extending further westward. And so when we're talking about Line 5 and the threat that it is to the Great Lakes, we have Enbridge, who will also spin narratives that this pipeline is safe, that it's never spilled, that we're dependent on it for our energy needs, that those are actually all lies. And they'll try and counter what folks within the Anishinaabe Nation are saying about the threat that this pipeline poses. It's an existential threat to Indigenous nations of the Great Lakes. And I think for me, I'm just really trying to break through that narrative and help people understand that Enbridge is not a good actor. We can live without this pipeline. In fact, there's been industry expert analyses that have been done, including one that was commissioned by my work and myself, that show we can live without this pipeline. We don't need it to meet our energy needs, but we absolutely cannot live without the Great Lakes. They're an incredibly important living relation of ours. So we need the government of Canada to really take seriously the matter of protecting the Great Lakes. This is a matter of national freshwater security, and Canada needs to stop supporting Enbridge in this fight and really listen to the Anishinaabe Nation about what needs to be done.
Thank you so much. And, before we pass it on, I wanted to find out if you wanted to mention a letter. If you would like to go ahead and say something. And this letter that Michelle's going to share with you is also on the weekend website. And if there's other places that you want to announce where it is, in case you're interested in signing this very important letter.
Yeah, so there is a letter that is going to be submitted to different Canadian ministers on April 24th, and this is specific to the Bad River Band case. Bad River Band is in Wisconsin. They're one of the tribes that, well, they have an actual court case against Enbridge, and Enbridge has been found guilty of trespassing on tribal land. By law, they cannot force the tribe to allow Enbridge and the pipeline to remain on the land. And so they've got to get out of there. And but Enbridge is trying everything that they can do to keep the pipeline operating through the tribe's land. We have a letter that if you go to Communities United by Water, I actually don't know the exact off the top of my head, but if you can Google Communities United by Water, and it's the Line 5 letter to Canadian ministers. And essentially we're asking Canada to rescind its use of something called the 1977 Pipeline Treaty. That treaty's been used both in the Michigan case and in the Bad River Band case as a means to thwart efforts to shut down the pipeline, and it's being used to circumvent tribal inherent and treaty rights. So we're calling on the ministers to revoke their use of that treaty, and to stop interfering in the proceedings that are happening in the states to shut down the pipeline.
It's really important not to say that it's, as been said, it's overdue by 20 years. And this is insane. It really needs to be shut down, as well as the pipeline that wants to go through. It's kind of confusing for people. There's Line 5 that exists now that is overdue, that should be shut down, and then the new Line 5 pipeline, and they both need to be decommissioned, stopped in their tracks. So thank you for that. And now I'm really honored to have Maho Andrade Serra. Please go ahead, you have the floor. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Maho Andrade Serra. I'm from the Quichua community of Serena in the Ecuadorian Amazon, and I'm part of the first indigenous-led GAR led by women in my province. I'm here and honored. I'm honored to be here because I'm presenting our document that we developed for more than a year. We are asking here to everyone, to the governments, to states, to companies, to everyone that you should respect first our self-determination. 2 weeks ago, we presented this in my community, in the first anniversary that was celebrated after years. We are now well organized just because the mining operators are coming to our territories. We are defending our lands from them because they see us only as resources, but we are beings. We are humans that feel. We are spirits that are in the jungle, that are in the river, are in every tree that we have. And this is just a result of that unity. We are here. We're saying we are here. We are saying we have the capabilities to develop our own documents, our own laws. Unfortunately, this document is written in Spanish, but all our elders, all our conversations, all our negotiations were made in our indigenous language, that is Quechua. Because we realize that we can do whatever we want if we are together. So right now, my community only has 205 inhabitants. It's a small community, but with a big heart that is fighting against all these mining operators. We are fighting against the state. We sue the state with our indigenous organization in the province. And we are winning our cases in legal battles. So here I'm presenting a document that reminds us every part of our community, from our sacred spots, from our traditional practices, and from even the youth, the children who are coming later. This document was made with a lot of effort. There's a lot of tears inside this, because our fight, it's every day. When someone asked me before, what are the impacts of climate change in your community? Because they say, your community seems good. You still have your river, you still have your forest. But I was saying, no. The level of the river is getting low. And since mining operators are nearby, the spirits are in shock. They are not there anymore. They are going away. When the spirits are going away, we are unprotected. So that's why we are here saying this document. It's just one declaration for the entire world. But it's an inherent right to have our territories, our lands, without any extractivism. Right now, we are threatened by these operators, my entire family. My mom was followed by all the mining operators till another city. My cousin is threatened. He was almost in a crash accident because a mining operator just crossed by. And my uncle, he's receiving threats every day because he's our ranger. He's protecting our territory, but he's receiving these threats. This is absolutely, it's a total injustice for us that this is happening, just because we want to live. But right now, with the group of people that we are in our community, with this protocol, with all the processes that we are doing right now, with the youth, with the women, we know we are gonna win. Maybe not physically, but at least spiritually. Because they are gonna know that we are here. The Quechua people of Serena, it's still here, it's still alive. And I'm really grateful for all the partnerships and all the allies that we have, because they know how to work with us. They respect our self-determination. This document, we said, nobody else is gonna write it. We are gonna write it. Even though our elders doesn't write in Spanish. They just speak Quechua. But it's important for us to develop these kind of partnerships, that they don't impose any alternatives. Because everything that's happening in our territories is our mother. From extractivism to infrastructure projects from governments, even education, health processes, they have to be in a dialogue with us. They have to ask for our consent. Everything is for us, and we have to do the same. We have the capabilities. We are indigenous, and I'm happy. Later, I'm gonna give you some of this. There's a lot of people here, but maybe we can download later in our website. but I have some copies here. And thank you so much and respect Indigenous self-determination.
Thank you so much. And I had also heard you on another panel, Maho, and I was just really moved, one, about also, in again, showing the document that you just shared with us, how important it is, to directly hear the plans of Indigenous peoples, not filtered through others. And you were also sharing, the effort it has taken you personally to get educated, to learn colonizer language, to go through this whole process just so you can communicate and have your people survive. And I just really wanted to honor the journey that you personally have been on, so you can sit here in these spaces and for people to understand, the effort that it takes for a lot of these Indigenous women to end up in this space and be, if you will, forced into these processes that are the very colonized spaces that cause the harm in the first place. So it's really deeply moving, all of you, because of the disproportionate power that is going on and the effort to be here and to have your voices heard, and how much non-Indigenous peoples really need to put out effort to have that reverse, where we need to be humbly sitting at your feet, those of you who are protecting the land and the water and our futures. And this is part of the decolonizing process we're all in. And so I just wanted to mention that. Thank you. And I wanted to give everyone a chance to have like a 3-minute reflection on the panel. You can also say something new. The floor is yours to sort of have, now that you've all heard from each other, any other comments you want to make. And we'll be starting with President Ravel. Each have about 3 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you so much for the wisdom that was shared today. I was actually getting quite emotional listening to the speakers, and I'm even more strengthened and empowered by our role as women, as Indigenous women. We have a unique obligation that is often not recognized, because as women we give life and we give birth, and because we understand the intricacies of that relationship to life, it is even more important that we're elevating the voices of Indigenous women as we move forward in protecting the climate and protecting the earth and protecting our water. And it's only by listening and learning from one another and uniting together and growing in strength that we'll be able to break down the barriers that have been placed around our communities. So thank you tonight for your wisdom and your words and your strength. Jamie Butch.
I'm really inspired by everyone that's sitting beside me, and thank you for all of the work that you're all doing in this fight that we're all in together. And I think, I'm really thinking a lot about the connections between all of the fights that we face. I actually have been in Central America and observed myself some of the ways in which Canadian mining operations are committing human rights violations in Quechua communities there and mine communities there. And it was so stark to me, the connections to how they're also violating the Indigenous rights here. I guess it's really overwhelming to think about the beast that we're living in being so critical. It really is. But what does give me hope is really a big resurgence right now of Indigenous culture and all of the calls for things like land back and honoring the treaties and honoring inherent rights that were the first treaties that we have with Creator and creation. And I think that the more that we can connect our fights across the Americas and across the world, that the better chance that we have of actually achieving our goals. And I think that even though companies like Enbridge Inc. in Canada are so powerful and so incredibly powerful, in fact, that it's hard for me to tell what the difference is between the state of Canada and Enbridge, to be honest. But even though they have all that power, I think that we have so much power and strength in us as the people, us as like la gente, you know, and yeah, I just want to end this on a note of like, I do believe it is possible for us to get to where we need to be as humanity and as a collective consciousness.
Mis últimas palabras, quiero agradecerles, compañeras. Para mí ha sido una fortaleza llevar este mensaje, estos pensamientos de todo grupo de la hermandad como mujeres a nivel Latinoamérica y a nivel internacional. Realmente quiero decir lo siguiente para terminar. Hablando del desarrollo del buen vivir con sistemas y también comparando con los pensamientos como mujeres indígenas que estamos en pie de lucha, la fuerza de la naturaleza nadie los va a parar. Un momento ocasionado una destrucción fenomenal, ni la ciencia, ni el sistema, ni un científico humano no lo va a parar. De hecho, poco a poco iremos acabándonos entre seres humanos y vamos a perecer. La naturaleza siempre va a triunfar, el mundo va a triunfar y se va a vengarse. Eso es lo bien claro, porque nosotros sabemos.
She said that her last words are to thank all of you. She feels very grateful about your presentations, to listen to you, and to all of you to be part of this panel. And she said that she thinks that all humanity and the sisterhood among all the women here and you is the most important, and she wants to talk about also the paradigm of the well living, and the well living is as powerful, is very powerful paradigm, but also she say that and that is very important because women are how do you translate in pie de lucha? That stand up
in the struggle.
In the struggle, in fight. Unfortunately, she knows what we are doing with Mother Earth in nature, the way that we are devastating her, and her own strength, all this damage that we are doing with Mother Earth, nobody will be able to stop that. No, the biggest scientific person, as human, all the damage that we have done, nobody can stop that. But she said that the only way to stop that is with all whole humanity and our collective effort in the struggle of every day.
First, I'm gonna say thank you to Josefina because she's really inspiring for me. Gracias, Josefina, por todo. You don't know, but she's one of the strongest women in Ecuador who's fighting against mining. So since I'm also fighting against it, it's really an honor to share a table with her because she's my elder. And sisters as well, because the work you do, it's reflecting what every indigenous woman has to do in our daily lives. I think it's really important for us to recognize that indigenous women are in danger just because we are women, we are indigenous. This is really sad for me because in all the panel I heard that we are the ones who are bringing life. But in a short story, I'm not a mother yet because I'm afraid that I cannot have my children to have a good connection with communities. And it's sad because I had a conversation like this with another group of young women who are facing the same threats. But I realized when I'm gonna have my children, I want to be in my community. So it's gonna be very difficult for me because I'm the only one from my community speaking in a different language that I'm speaking for all my community and for the entire Amazon as well. When I decide to have a baby, I want to be in my community, like I did. I grew up in my community. I grew up with my grandma teaching me how to cook in the fire. I remember I ended school or ended our duties in our gardens. I remember to go to the river and playing with my cousins. But right now, I don't know if my kids are gonna have the same experience as me. That's why I'm fighting. That's why everyone should fight with all of us, especially putting a lot of attention on indigenous women who are doing the best that we can do, living and resisting. Thank you.
So much. I'm just really moved to tears. Thank you for sharing, all of you, and for your powerful work and words in the world. And I just wanted to sort of dedicate also this session to, something that has been really important to us at Weekend is really a call to action for the protection rights of women land defenders. Because that's what we're talking about here. We see around the world how it is women, indigenous women, who are the backbone of a lot of this resistance effort, and also the vision of where we need to be. And that's just a fact. And there is a growing trend in attacks, murder, and intimidation against human rights and indigenous land defenders worldwide. And we know this from Global Witness. You can look up the statistics. And the way particularly indigenous women land defenders are impacted by that, and how it affects them more due to gender inequality. And there's a lot of unjust practices that are threatening the health of indigenous communities because of this. And as I say, women and indigenous women in particular face even greater challenges and dangers as they navigate the brutal intersection of environmental devastation, cultural dislocation, and sexual violence and gender-based persecution. And it's a very real thing, and I didn't want to leave that out because it's sort of been part of the underlying conversation today. And that when indigenous land and water protectors are murdered or criminalized, we must collectively speak out and take action. It's not enough just to learn about it. We have to do something about it. And for all the reasons that we've heard, it's indigenous peoples who are protecting 80% of the biodiversity for all of us. And that means we are all responsible. We all need to be engaged. And we should be supporting our relatives just because it's the right thing to do, but it also means all of our futures. And one thing I wanted to bring up on a practical note that we're working on and invite others to, and all of the fights and all of the struggles that have been mentioned today, are many, are all on our website. You can read all the full bios, all the call to action from all the women today there. But we're also working on something with partners in the Amazon called the Escazú Agreement. And it's a very unusual agreement in the Latin American Caribbean region that combines both environmental defense with human rights defense. So it's a very unique law that really can be something that can help women land defenders. Of course, it has to be implemented properly, which we will have to fight for. But I think it's a very interesting development in protection. As many of you might know, Latin America is one of the deadliest regions in the world for land defenders. and attacks and criminalization of women protecting their territories and communities is very specific. So also the bravery of the women is incredible to know that they're up against these systems of oppression. So we're really fighting for the Escazú Agreement, and along with many others, WeCan has been advocating for this agreement and for many years, and in November 5th, 2020, it was fully ratified, and it is a really groundbreaking rule that could be a real game changer to protect land defenders. And tomorrow, you can go to our website. We're going to be having a session on the Escazú Agreement with women land defenders from Latin America. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is because I want to acknowledge the incredible courage and risk that every single woman on both these panels, and there's a lot of Indigenous women in the room here who could also be sitting on this panel, and we really need to understand the courage and challenge and risks that are being taken and step up to the plate and stand there with them. I know some of us have been out there in the field getting arrested and standing with our bodies, and we need to continue to do that because the fact is it's getting more severe as the last of the forests and water and the land is coming after, and companies coming after for extraction. It's actually going to increase, not decrease. And the increase of criminalization is growing, and the violence is growing as people realize that our resources are shrinking, and the companies are going after the last of growing this ridiculous, dangerous economic model that we're in that we all know has to change. And so it is a call to action to understand, what are we all going to do to stand up with our sisters around the world. And the last thing I want to say on a different note is also I know all of these women on both panels could tell us so much about their reciprocity practices, how to live in right relationship with the land, what is proper autonomy, how to not take back too much, how to live in a way where we're not over-consuming, taking and taking and taking. And so we have so much to learn from Indigenous women and their traditional ecological knowledge, their spiritual knowledge. And some of the time, the women that we work with, and you can see on this panel, they have so much to offer. And they're also forced to tell us about their fights because they have to survive. And they often tell me, I wish we could tell you about our gardens and our spiritual knowledge. And they're in so much survival all the time. That part of the story doesn't often get to be centered. But also, I just know we could learn so much from all of you about how to live in good relationship and live in buen vivir in a good way with the land and the earth. And I want to acknowledge also, that part of the knowledge that you carry, and I hope that we can make space for that for you as well. So with that, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Please go to our website so you can read all of their full bios. You can learn how to support them financially, support whatever calls to actions and letters that they're calling for. And we thank you all so much for joining us today. And please follow up with all of them. And again, we thank you again.